Hey Jose, thanks so much for joining today. I'm really happy to have you on the podcast for the Awakened Mind. And so, how's your day going so far?
Day is going pretty good. Thank you for having me here today. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. I want to share before we dive into Jose's story. I want to share a little bit more about how we got to know each other. And it's really interesting because with as you've seen the title of this episode is really starting to look at those differences between like psychotherapy and traditional therapy versus hypnotherapy. But we actually have the same office space. We're in the same building together. And it's so funny. I've never told you this actually. I was walking through by your hallway with someone one time and they saw your business name on the door and they said, my gosh, your competition. Oh my gosh, you have competition in this office. And I know you're laughing because you feel the same way as me. And I'm like, oh no, he's great. And I feel like they thought it was unfathomable that we are friends and we do cross referrals together. So I always say if we're collaborating, then we're helping more people. And I really appreciate you that you feel the same way about all this too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We're in it together, and I think it feels like a big family, even for other clinicians that are there in
Yes.
our same building. It's just like we all know each other, and hey, this person might be a good fit for you. And I love that attitude. I love that atmosphere. Hmm.
Yeah, there is someone who resonates with everyone. That's how I
Exactly.
feel about it. And I really wanted to bring you on to this podcast not only to share your expertise, but also be we are very similar and the way that we view things, right? And so but
Mhm.
it's also, there's differences that I'm sure you're going to have, or we may even have differing opinions on today's podcast episode. So,
Yeah.
you doing both hypnotherapy and also psychotherapy, you've had so much experience in so many different areas.
Mhm.
When you started kind of unlocking and you added hypnotherapy as a service for you, can you share just a little bit about what that was like for you, kind of switching gears just a little bit from one modality to another modality and what differences you saw within that?
Yeah, so I remember it was in 2015 to 2016 was when I was getting my training, and I got trained by Danny Jackson, who was a known hypnotist here in
Mhm.
Orlando. Now I think he transitioned to Kentucky, and he transitioned to be a more on the theology side, so more in church. I think he's a pastor now,
Okay.
but I think he may still do hypnosis at the side. But when I was desperately trying to get experience in trauma, because what I saw
Okay.
with many people that had addictions was that they had a lot of trauma. But then I didn't have any type of modality that I was trained in that was trauma focused. So I became desperate because I wasn't a licensed clinician at the time. So at that time, I was still working for Florida Hospital. I actually worked two jobs. I was working two jobs. One which was a case manager for the emergency department in downtown Orlando in the big hospital. Night shifter for 3 days a week. And I still had a side gig at Advent Health Waterman, which was stationed in Tavares, right? So
Mhm.
up north, and was more home care based. So I was a case
Okay.
manager, home care based clinical social worker. I got desperate at the time and I said, you know what? I'm just going to go and see what clinics can give me experience, even if what they pay me is nothing or voluntary. I don't care, man. I just want to get trauma experience because I believed in my soul that if I was trained in trauma as a clinician, that I could take anything, that I could handle anything in mental health, at least with the population that we treat, right? Because there is, SMI, which is severe mental illness. That's
Mhm.
a different dimension. But at least with people dealing with anxiety, frustration, guilt complex, which PTSD usually carries everything, all of that kind of like into one package. I was like, if I learn how to treat someone with trauma, I will be competent enough. At least that's what I
Yes.
had in my mind, that I won't be afraid of anything. Usually most things will not intimidate me as a clinician, and if I get to that level of confidence, then I think that puts me in a place of, in a path where it's easier to then work towards mastery. I think that was just like the intuition that I had, but then after reading Robert Greene's book called Mastery, that's exactly what it was. So I was so glad. I was like, oh, I wasn't going crazy.
Yeah. You confirmed through intuitively. You were able to back it up with confirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
once I walked into Danny Jackson's clinic called Orlando Hypnosis Clinic, there was a unsettling feeling of fear,
Mm.
right, towards hypnosis. And I was like, why is
Yes.
this? And I knew that, this is a place, this is a clinic that treats people that have unsolved trauma, right?
Mhm.
So Danny Jackson's background was a substance abuse counselor. So it was like once he interviewed me, he was like, "That's exactly what I need. I need someone that is rooted and that has been trained in treating
Mhm.
addictions." All
Yes.
right, and I was
Yeah.
like, however, and I told him in an interview, like, "Hey, but what I'm really interested is in mastering trauma." And he was like, "The fact that you're already trained in substance abuse, trust me, you have many powerful tools already that are you're just gonna need an icing on the cake, right,
Mhm.
to learn how to treat trauma. You'll see." And when I was training and he was showing me, okay, this is an induction, which an induction is a progressive muscle relaxation that we do basically. In
Mhm.
psychotherapy, that's what they would call it.
Yeah, isn't that funny how guided visualization.
There's just so many names, but it's the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
before and just so we know, as we're recording, before this episode, I also have a release plan, which if you're listening to this, you already know this now, but just an overview of the basics of hypnosis. So if you're not sure some of the terms that we're using within this episode to get a better understanding of hypnosis, you could go back to the last one, just the previous one, and go listen to that to basic kind of terms and understandings. But I would just wanted to interject that. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, so I was pretty scared. And I didn't know at the time at first. I was like, why is there this nervousness that I'm
I was
feeling?
going to ask you where that was coming from. Yeah.
Later on, I discovered, just kind of like introspectively, I was looking at some videos on Gerald Kind. Gerald Kind was a famous hypnotist from
Mm-hmm.
Fort Lauderdale. Calvin Banyan also, which was he was the one that invented a hypnosis protocol called Five Path, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
basically like fusing Gestalt therapies with
Yes.
hypnosis. Very, very effective. Um, when I was looking at the videos and just getting into this, just something didn't feel right in the core of my soul, and so I started exploring. Like, wait a minute, why am I feeling that something isn't right? And then,
Mm.
it came to me. I remember it was like a Wednesday morning. I went for a walk. I went to exercise. I said, I'm gonna go for a walk and just like sit with these thoughts, as I'm going through the training. Mind you, I'm going through this training, like absorbing like 4 hours, 5 hours of visual training of just hypnosis. I got obsessed with it
Yeah.
because as a kid, I had dealt with attention deficit.
Mm.
So school was hard for me, but the moment something was super interesting to me, then it's like the other side.
Hyper focused. I'm the same way.
It's
We
like,
also have the same personality profile, which is so funny that we
so I became so obsessed because I was
yeah.
like, this is so, so amazing to me, but why does it feel like I'm doing something wrong? And then
Hmm.
when I went on that walk, I said, you know what? I'm gonna put Tesseract down, that's my favorite band from the UK, Activist, North Lane, which is usually like metal music, progressive metal. And I said, I'm gonna put the earphones down, and I'm just gonna sit with what is it that is like some type of dichotomy that I have inside of me as I'm training
Hmm.
to, being trained and gathering all this information of hypnosis. When I went on that walk, I said, I'm scared of something. So what am I scared of?
Yeah.
And then it kind of like I said, well, I'm not only scared, it looks like I have guilt about something. And then when I explored it, it came down to that when I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist, the churches, especially in Dominican Republic, it was always said that hypnosis was more so kind of like in the dark arts. So something closer to voodoo,
Mm,
something closer to black magic, something closer to, you know, manipulating someone's head, and
yeah.
that person wasn't going to be able, that the only person that should be influencing your mind should be God or Jesus, and anything other than that was just, you know, complete mind control. And I was like, but it looks so much like prayer. So to me, I was like, why am I scared of this if it looks a lot like
Yeah.
prayer?
Mm-hmm.
It looks a
Yeah.
lot like how and I don't mean the type of prayer of just kind of like memorizing a Bible verse and dear God, thank you for the state, thank you for everything you've given us, like that, like just memory based babble.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like a devoted meditator or
Yes.
a devoted even atheist or agnostic person that's just sending positive vibes to the universe, right?
Mm.
And I said, this is what it looks like mostly. In fact, I don't know why I don't hear any hypnotists wording it that way, and I don't hear any pastors wording hypnosis that way. Why can't
Mm-hmm.
we all just like work together hand in hand, right? Because it's so like each other. So
Yes.
that exploded my mind. And then after that, I started getting practical experience. Danny told me, hey, it's time. I think you've read a lot. It's time that
Mm-hmm.
you try to execute these things. And you just gather someone, you do a consultation. I followed the consultation just like how he conducted
Mm-hmm.
them. And I said, hey, I'd rather do everything exactly the way you do it. And then I can put my sauce into it maybe in the future. I'd rather do it how you do it, right? So I just wanted to be a copycat. I was like, I'd rather do like I can already see that people are getting really healing very quickly, way quicker than in psychotherapy, and I guess we'll get to that
Yeah,
in a
I
little
want to
bit.
dive into the meat of that too soon. Go ahead. Yeah.
And when I started doing my first induction ever, I was trembling. My voice would tremble, almost my voice would vanish at first, and I was like, wow, even though I've settled this with myself, there's like an innate fear that just wants to come over, like, hey, this is wrong. You're
Mm.
controlling someone's head. And through exposure, it eventually went away. I think like 5 sessions in, it went away. When I saw that people were healing, and I was like, hey, this is a
Yeah.
lot like prayer. In fact, I wouldn't even say that it's much different from psychotherapy other than how quick it works. Like it's much like psychotherapy because a CBT therapist is going to be using, you know, Socratic questioning, right? Which
Yes. Yeah.
Socratic questioning a lot of times is going to be a little bit like, or a lot of it is going to be like NLP, right? Neuro
Mm-hmm.
linguistics
You
programming, the
learn that.
language.
Yeah, I've been trained on that type of questioning within
Mm-hmm.
NLP. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting when you find, as you're talking about all of this, we find that all of the methods somewhat overlap in some ways. And the fact that you were able to find that on your own, like through
Yeah,
your own training,
yeah,
it
yeah,
is pretty cool to it's really it's the mindset, and I've always said this too, and I know that you think on this mindset as well, is like, well, what works?
yeah, yeah,
Show me, give me what works, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's even, Jose, where I've had conversations with people like this in the past, and they'll be like, well, what do you do, what do you call yourself? And I'm like, I don't even care at this point, just
yeah,
I care like what I'm doing to help you. So if the method changes in 5 years and I don't label myself as a hypnotherapist anymore, then whatever, as long as
yeah,
you're getting the change. So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
Because I find myself, in the Myers-Briggs, the intuition that I have is really it's like 85%. So with that personality, I question everything all the time. So it's like even sometimes I question, and I know that it's almost like irrational. It's like, wait, is hypnosis just a very powerful placebo effect? Sometimes is
Hmm.
it like we're really convincing? Is hypnosis even real? Sometimes I go back and forth between those questions. I'm like that
Yeah.
guy in the Bible, Peter. Hey, am I really walking on water? Even though he was really
Yeah.
walking on water,
Yeah.
and then he
Mhm.
started thinking when I'm the same guy. But every time that I see my clients healing and telling me their feedback, those are my real teachers. Those
Yes.
are the real teachers because what I've seen is that even though I'm using the same algorithm, the same protocol every time, the same induction, the same, I'm a repetition ninja. That's what I call myself. I can just repeat the same thing as long as I know it works. That's my happy.
Yes.
That's like my happy icing on the cake or dessert for the day is when I see my clients healing. So, but everyone utilizes hypnosis so differently.
Mhm.
Like in many ways, they all like even when you regress them and they do a regression and
Mhm.
in regressive therapy, you do, life regression. I do age mostly focus on age regression, but they're doing all the work and you're there as a guide. And then you
Yes.
sit back and then you're like, wow, this person utilizes differently from this other client that healed just a week ago. And now they're doing it differently. And it looks like they're taking a third person perspective versus a person that's like completely subjective in it. I'm sensing, my five senses and I'm completely in it. So it's so amazing because with hypnosis, for at least for me, you can't get bored. There's always like some different sauce that someone's bringing to their healing, and I'm
Right.
like, this is amazing to observe.
And
It doesn't feel like work. It's so fun to watch, and it's so interesting.
that, yeah, it's I always say my days go by so incredibly fast. And it's kind of fun. I mean, I play around with
Yep.
my clients sometimes. I'm like, well, this is a popcorn worthy one. I'm just going to sit back and watch the healing happen.
Yeah.
On the note with the religious piece, and this is something that I've received a lot of questions and skepticism for Christianity or for different other types of religions. And I know that many people have faced skepticism because what they've heard in the past. What are some of the I know the ones that I can share as well, but for you specifically, what are some of like those most common forms of skepticism or even just misunderstandings? We've gone into some of those, but what do you normally tell people in those situations?
So usually a lot of people will come with a misconception that you can manipulate memories with hypnosis, that you can
Mm-hmm.
alter them, that you can erase them, and that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
So I explained to them like, hey, the best metaphor that I have that I think is the quickest one to grasp is that I tell people, hey, you're the commander of an army, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're the commander and you are 5% of your true mind's capacity, right? And that's you, your conscious you. That's the conscious. The subconscious, on the other hand, is the army. So I
Mm-hmm.
ask them, can you by force tell the army what to do and when? Not by force because they are 100 people versus you. They're
Yeah.
stronger than you. However, you as the commander, if you grow in your skill of persuasion and charisma, you're going to be able to convince the army to work with you rather than against.
Ooh, I like the word charisma that you
Mm-hmm.
use there. I say persuasion or curiosity. I feel like removes a lot of the fear if someone comes in and they're like, I don't know what to expect, and they're feeling a
Exactly.
little bit anxious. It's anything new. But yeah, the charisma of
Yeah.
being able to. Now, you also had mentioned that you've noticed faster changes with hypnotherapy versus psychotherapy. Are you able to, we may get a little controversial, or I may have a different perspective than you,
No, of
but
course.
for you specifically, because this is what we're here for, what are some drawbacks that you have seen with someone using hypnotherapy instead of psychotherapy?
The drawbacks, and I
Mm-hmm.
get this information mostly from my clients, right? Like when they've tried
Mm-hmm.
hypnosis, I tried hypnosis, in Chicago, or I went to this place in New Jersey, or even here in Orlando. And the drawbacks that I've seen is that their expectations were not matching what was possible in hypnosis.
Mm,
The other thing that I've seen is
okay.
that they will come complaining like, well, I just don't hypnotize. It was a cousin that referred me to try hypnosis because
Yeah.
it worked so well for them. Then when I went, I couldn't hypnotize. And I was like, what do you mean you couldn't
You're like,
hypnotize?
explain to me what happened.
I couldn't, like, I was just there. I could hear everything that was happening and all that. And I was like, interesting because, but then I asked them, but did you feel like a little bit heavier? Did you feel more relaxed? And they were like, yeah, we're more relaxed for sure. And I asked them that, and then you said that the panic attacks after that kind of like diminished a little bit the
Went
week
away.
after. I go through symptomology and they're like, a little bit, yeah, but I think it was just like the realization and being more aware of my feelings and thoughts. And then I sit back and I'm like smiling and I'm like, you did benefit. And then how many sessions did you have? And he was like, just one. And
Just
I'm like, okay, yeah, bro. Yeah, bro.
yeah, oh, that's so funny. It's interesting because it's again, here's who I blame for this is media. I blame the media for the misinformation about what hypnosis actually is. And I think that that is also the drawbacks that I've seen with my clients is a lot of education
Hmm.
of this is what to expect. And even I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Joe
Yes,
Dispenza's work.
yes, yes.
And he even talks about going to his, because if you don't know Dr. Joe Dispenza, he has a week long intensive meditation retreat. And he always tells everyone to release the expectations. I mean, even Tony Robbins says trade expectations for appreciation. And
Exactly.
so, what it sounds like you're saying is that sometimes a drawback is almost like that pre-education piece or almost this kind of wishy-washy what am I actually going to experience because it's different for everyone.
Yeah, 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 it is.
Okay.
The way that I explain to a client that makes it so much
Mm-hmm.
easier is me and you are going to team up, me and
Right.
the conscious you, to then educate your subconscious on the changes you want for yourself.
Right. Yeah,
And
I
when I
like
speak
that.
just normal language like that, not like, NLP or whatever, even though we know those terminologies, but just like explaining, hey, this is what you've been doing, this is what you want to do differently. So let's just go ahead and influence your subconscious to do that. But you're going to be the main person. You're going to be the protagonist of this whole work.
Right.
And of
Yep.
course, in many ways, believe it or not, it's gonna feel much more easy than when you were participating in psychotherapy. Most of I don't know about you, but most of the clients that I see, I would say 80% of them already went through psychotherapy. Like
Same.
most of the people that I
Yeah.
see are desperate. They're like, man, I don't care if it's black magic. I just want to get rid of this anxiety without having to take clonazepam anymore. That's what I usually, those are the
I've
people that I
never
have.
had someone say verbatim to me that, but usually I have people say you're my last resort.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah,
well, we're in a great position for change then, because it
exactly.
means you're extra ready for this.
Yeah.
And same exact thing. Same thing as when my clients come to me, they have done psychotherapy and they'll usually say, I'm ready to take it a step further, which I'll give my perspective on it too. Is I love when my clients have gone to therapy. I know
Hmm.
it's not a requirement for them to have it to do hypnosis, but enjoy when they've done it because then they're used to that self exploration piece and we're able to dive in like a lot deeper, much quicker than if someone's come to me and says, I haven't done much of anything, then we just move a little bit slower, which is okay as well. Listen, I love all types of therapy, and I think that it could be any type can be beneficial for the person. And it's like a puzzle piece. You're finding whatever the puzzle pieces that work best, and maybe hypnosis is the whole tree, or maybe it's just planting the seeds to things. But I mean, like you, I've seen so many, and of course, we're biased. This is what we do, but seen so many miraculous changes and healings within people. But what would you say if someone had asked you, like, when should someone not do hypnosis? Like, when would you say, let's start you with psychotherapy, or does that ever happen for you?
I would say that if the person still has a very strong internal dichotomy about participating in hypnosis, like they don't, there's a part of them that just really doesn't want to do that work,
Right.
or the person that doesn't think they have a problem. Like the most difficult
Mm.
person for me to ever engage on is with people that have symptomology of narcissistic personality disorder or a true narcissist. Because most of
Okay.
the time when I've seen them, I've only seen like five true people with NPD coming to therapy, like participating actively. And the stance they have is like, hey, I'm here because my partner told me that if I don't come to this place, that that's
They're
it,
going to
that
leave.
our relationship is done, right? And I kid you not, in four scenarios, four of those five, that was the same exact scenario,
Mm.
that they were under an ultimatum, right? And then
Yes.
the other fifth person was that they were just trying to find out more about their client that was participating in therapy with me.
Oh
So kind of
boy.
like a mini investigation.
Sneaky.
Yeah, which you
A
know what
little
that means.
PI going on.
Which that means like let me gather more ammo, right? Because in
Yes.
their mind they
Oh,
were
that's
like,
a
oh,
whole separate
yeah,
podcast
oh
right
yeah, for
there.
sure, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's whole podcasts on narcissistic personality disorder or traits, or I mean, and so I've had that happen where I've had consultations and maybe they've come to you,
Yeah, yeah,
but I turn them down. I say you have
yeah.
to want it. And if you're listening to this podcast episode, really the purpose of us wanting to get together and talk about this is also for you to identify, if you're looking for help, what is the next best step for you. So you're kind of
Mhm.
gaining both perspectives. And on that note, when it comes to psychotherapy, what do you think are some drawbacks of that versus hypnosis?
Psychotherapy takes a long time to work.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, that was the model that I specialized on, that I got trained in. And I think it was the most
Mm-hmm.
powerful type of psychotherapy that I was ever trained on. And that was the first psychotherapy that I was trained on that was trauma focused, right?
Mm.
And so EMDR, and Francine Shapiro is actually the author of that model. I think she passed away right when I got into the VA in 2018. I don't remember the date yet, but I believe in my hearts of hearts, even though it wasn't said in her book or anything, that Francine actually was a hypnotist before, but she didn't want the
She
bias.
didn't want the,
She
oh,
didn't want the bias that
okay.
came with hypnosis of and the skepticism. So I think in part she brought hypnosis to the only way that you can bring hypnosis to psychotherapy without having to close the eyes, but rather
Your
use the
eyes are
bilateral
open.
stimulation
Mm-hmm.
and get the person to have one step out of the traumatic memory and one step in here. And what does that sound like? A lot of the trauma focused hypnotic techniques that we use
Yes.
are so that the person activates the parasympathetic nervous system, feeling calm, collected, rather
Mm.
than sympathetic, which is that fight or flight, detach them from that fight or flight and have them then revisit the trauma. That is so much more chill, so much more
Yeah.
chill than in psychotherapy. You have a lot of people have what us hypnotists call abreaction,
Mm-hmm.
which is that they're totally back there. They're
Mm.
completely there and they are like just freaking out, like to
Mm-hmm.
100% max. And then at that point, we're forced into then grounding the person back to reality. Hey, tell me something that you see, touch, smell,
Right.
feel in the here and now. Look at that doorknob, look at that lamp. We have to
Right.
then ground them, then do some diaphragmatic breathing, and then that's like 15, 20 minutes of a whole session to bring the person
And
back.
then they may leave feeling
And then they may leave and never come back
worse.
because they're like,
Yeah, never.
shoot,
Yeah.
nah, man, I'm just gonna leave those kind
They
of
don't
worms there.
understand. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned the EMDR as well, because like we talked about different techniques, it really goes back to how I feel that hypnosis is becoming more widely accepted. And I always say I'm on such a mission to make hypnosis and hypnotherapy mainstream and
Hmm.
mental health. That's because it's such a powerful, when trained properly, it's such a powerful modality to help someone in healing. And I still don't understand it sometimes. With, I know there's a lot of things from the past, that has created this dialogue around hypnosis. But when we look into these different types of like EMDR and different skills, is it sounds, when my clients describe EMDR to me, I'm like, oh, that sounds really similar, like in a way to what I do, without some of these specifics or specific name to it. Or, and I'm thinking to myself, these sound like hypnotic techniques. And
Hmm. Hmm.
every time I hear of that, it sounds very similar. So that would make sense if
Hmm.
she, and we're going to have to look that up, if she was a hypnotist, because she would just be bringing that side of it without getting the backlash of, I don't want to be shamed out of my career because of it. At that time, it still
Exactly.
wasn't as widely accepted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. Correct.
Okay.
But I think the work that hypnosis can bring, the leverage that hypnosis has majorly over psychotherapy is that any psychotherapy techniques, emotional regulation, like from DBT, from dialectical
Mm-hmm.
behavioral therapy, radical acceptance, techniques from this famous model that I was always impressed by. I'm not trained in it, but acceptance and commitment
Commitment
therapy, that
therapy.
is one
Yeah.
of the most powerful psychotherapy that I've seen. Because when I used to see veterans, they would do 12 sessions of that and come back a new person when it
Mm,
comes to depression. Like that
mm,
was one of the most, that was way quicker than in cognitive behavioral when it came to treating depression directly. And so what I see, the drawback of psychotherapy is that since it takes so long, many people don't have the attention span for it and don't have the discipline to stay the course for it to work. Because cognitive
okay.
behavioral therapy does work. It centers your cognitions, right? So those thoughts and differentiating which thoughts are rational, which ones aren't, then being mindful of the emotion, and then how that emotion and cognitions impact the behavior, and then vice versa, how the behavior
Mm-hmm.
impacts the other two and how the emotions impact the other two. So it is very effective, and I would say is the mother modality of most coaching that we have today, and even
Yes.
many hypnosis
Yes.
protocols that we have today. So I'm actually very thankful to CBT. But
Yeah.
CBT, like normal CBT, it takes
A
long,
long time.
long time for people to get the true benefit of it. I would say like the average, if a person is like doing weekly sessions, I would say it comes down to like a year and a half to see like a complete transformation with a person where, EMDR is descaling trauma. But what I've seen is that when someone goes through a trauma-focused model, such as at the VA, there was EMDR, prolonged exposure, and cognitive processing therapy, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a trauma-focused CBT. And usually it would be 12 sessions. And it descales trauma, and it does a really good, well job at doing it in 12 sessions. But the issue that I think happens in psychotherapy is that the core foundation of the PTSD symptom, which is usually going to be rooted in stress or anxiety as the
Yes.
base feeling, that isn't explored. So you'll have a person kind of like
Okay.
stop
Yeah.
having PTSD symptoms, but they haven't mastered anxiety yet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Anxiety, the worry, the fear, the hypervigilance is still there. It's just, it has de-escalated significantly, right? So the person's maybe
Yeah.
not having flashbacks, maybe not having reoccurring nightmares, and etc. But it's still, there's a hypervigilance that's still there. It's like a subtle, still anxiety there, right? And so
Yes.
what I've seen with hypnosis is that hypnosis, other than just having 6 to 8 sessions where it does, the five sometimes even, where it does the same thing psychotherapy does in 12, right, for trauma focused therapy, then it also goes to the initial synthesizing event that started it all, which is usually
Mm-hmm.
below the ages of 10 or
10.
below.
Yeah.
And that is hard to get to in psychotherapy because the person's not activating, not necessarily activating, because some people can activate a trance where they can go back to earlier stages where they felt that
Not as
aspect bridge,
easily.
but not as
Yeah, not
easily.
near as easy. Yeah, I've seen clients be able to do it when we're in deep in conversation and they're able to get really comfortable and they really drop into that state and they're starting to connect and be able to go back to that. But you're right, being in hypnosis is much easier to
Hmm.
be able to get there and
Hmm.
release
Hmm.
rather than just talk. I mean, I've had so many clients, like you say, open their eyes and say, wow, I feel like I just did 10 years of therapy
Yeah, yeah,
in one session.
that is such a good, those are such amazing words to hear. I never get tired of it.
Yeah. And I love, and I hope that, and we're all in, I hope that more, and I've been interviewing Jose a lot of therapists on different types of topics. But I feel like this is, I'm hoping over time becoming more mainstream for just your CBT therapist, or to be able to start to harness even hypnosis style techniques and use them more and actually label it and say, yes, I'm also a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist.
Yeah, yeah,
And how cool. And then everyone can say, wow, this is not a woo woo thing. We're not doing black magic. We're not, I've only been called a witch a couple times. But I really appreciate you coming on and talking about all this. And the other question I had is, I'm curious, do you believe that hypnosis will become a more mainstream mental health treatment in the future?
yes, I do believe that. And that's because directly when I worked at the VA, I could see how the VA has actually opened up a whole different kind of concept called whole health. And whole
Mm-hmm.
health is kind of like the more, I would say, like experimental and innovative part of the VA where they're doing heartfulness meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and then they've also integrated clinical hypnosis in there. So
Wonderful. Okay.
and then I get to hear it from my girlfriend, Dr. Ivy, who still works at the Veterans Affairs. And she actually she's with ASH, which is the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis,
Yes.
which is I think it's the only one that the VA affiliates with. So the fact that they affiliate
Okay.
with ASH, that is already a sign that it's an open concept.
Yes. Yeah.
However, it just depends on the execution of how they do it if they choose to make that a service that's provided for everyone they treat.
Yeah.
Because of course, hypnosis isn't you can't bill hypnosis under insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And at least for medical treatment or clinical treatment in the US, that's usually how many populations have access to this type of treatment.
Do
But
you
if the
feel that
VA if the
will
VA does it, I think it's going to come through. I think it'll be like 10, 15 years before that happens.
Okay. Okay,
Hmm.
yeah, that was my next question, is if you feel that it will eventually get accepted by insurance,
Hmm.
because this is such a powerful thing. But the cool thing about doing hypnotherapy is, even though it is self-pay, it's a shorter time frame that you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's not designed to be going to every single month. Like, it's kind of like, let's get rid of this and move
Hmm.
forward, have some
Hmm.
tools and techniques to move forward and process on your own and feel more confident and whatever's going on in the future, and then come back if something new pops up. That's kind of the
Exactly.
idea. But yeah, I think that this is, to me, it feels much more, I guess, like a relief when I think about all the clients that I've helped, and you even sharing from your perspective. Yeah, I do feel the VA thing is super cool.
Hmm.
And also, if you're listening to this episode and you're like, well, I'm a little kind of nervous still to try this out, then do some online things or groups or something a little lighter, even to begin with. It doesn't have to be with either of us, or it could be with either of us or both of us. It doesn't matter. Just go back and forth, ping pong back and forth. Yeah, just try something small. And I'm sure that you'll see that it's not a scary thing.
Hmm.
that it is something that can be really easy to do, and it feels good. And when you find the right person, it doesn't have to be that complicated. It's very
Exactly.
simple.
It's very
Yeah,
simple, very chill, and
exactly. Very
it
chill.
feels almost as if you did like a yoga class. You came out of a yoga class, you came out of like a Tai
Yeah.
Chi class, or you just finished meditation.
Yeah.
It's that type of feeling of like being in touch between mind and body.
For sure.
That with the type of population that we are, just working day to day and doing and taking care of kids, and just the work ethic that we have today in 2024, it can be very, very difficult to reach a solid state of mind where you're grounded with your senses, that you're
That's right.
truly in the here and now. And being in the here and now is the primary access point to joy. That's why when you see
That's it.
that
Yeah.
movie, I love that movie Inside Out.
Yeah.
Part two says there's a character there that says, not to spoil or anything, but says like, enjoy the time you have now because as you get older, it gets more difficult. I think that can be reversed if we
Mm-hmm.
find the time to ground ourselves back into the present.
Yes.
Because when we were kids, it was easy. When we were children, it
Absolutely.
was easy. We didn't even have any concept of time in our early years. That's why it was just us and that toy. But now that we have rent, that we have, school, that we have bills, that we have
Mm-hmm.
all these things, it can
Traffic.
be difficult to that exactly traffic.
Yeah.
It can be
Traffic where we
difficult.
are.
Yeah, Orlando, my
Yeah.
gosh. But nothing
Yeah.
compared to LA, supposedly. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's getting
Same.
close. But it can be difficult to ground ourselves back into the present and access and be able to access that joy as if we were kids, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's almost as if when you do hypnosis, it'll be that thing that for those of you that have seen like the leverage of how good I feel after working out, the endorphins, the release, the wow, I did something I didn't want to do, lifting, I hate deadlifts, I hate squats, but I did it this morning and now I'm,
Mm-hmm.
I'm on my way to work. I feel great about myself. It is that same, it is that same thing for the mind.
Same feeling.
The same thing.
That's
It's
right.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta listen to Jose's recordings. I guess I'll do it. But then you feel great about it, and then you're like, yeah, I need to keep doing this.
I always
Right?
say it's a mental massage for the mind. Just
Exactly.
as you would get a massage for your body, you're just getting a massage for your brain.
Exactly.
So,
That's a
yeah.
perfect way to word it.
Yeah.
Perfect way to word it. Yeah.
Well, I have one more question, which is a very important question. And it is that you have received an all expenses paid trip to anywhere in the universe, real or make believe. Where would you go? And what is the very first thing you would do?
The Land of Eorzea in Final Fantasy, my favorite RPG of all time. I grew up in that
Oh,
world,
yeah.
role-playing game. And the role-playing game of Final Fantasy is much like life. Like you just level up, you gain these skills, and you become more
Yeah.
powerful, and then you defeat more foes, and you just keep going. But it's not just about like all the fighting, it's interacting with people, forming bonds, and these decision makings that you make, you add people to your party, right? And then three people, there's a red mage, there's a white mage, and then you might be the other caster or pictomancer or whatever you pick, and then you're tackling these things and you're sharing a bond with these people around you that are helping you to conquer the way, right? And I think that's
That is
like
life.
the same thing that
Yeah.
we do in life. It's like you add people to your
Yeah.
party, some people leave, some people come back, and you just keep evolving. But at the end of the day, you're the one who makes the decision of do you want to grow into the positive or do you want to make choices that are going to grow you into the negative? So I think it's
That's
you can
amazing.
you can take the path of the Jedi or the path of the Sith. It's up to you really. And I think I'm glad that I exist in a place and a time where I can be part of that fiction, right? That join
Yes.
that world of fiction, and it's such a place for me to chill with friends. I play with other clinicians that I've gotten them into that game, and it's just like, oh, let's do one dungeon today, and then just kick back and talk about stuff. So I think that
That's
would be
awesome.
the most chill place to visit. What about you?
I love that. I mean, I have gone back and forth on Hogwarts.
Oh, nice.
I would love to go to Hogwarts. I also would love to be picked up on a spaceship by a bunch of aliens and just ask a bunch of questions. So if I
There
ever
we go.
disappear, I was abducted.
Willingly, it looks like.
Willingly, yeah, I went on my free will. Yeah, so but I love hearing people's responses, and you're right, this is some, if we almost look at life like a game, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You can create the
Yeah.
same things. People leave, people come
Hmm.
back.
Hmm.
You create your own experiences, and that's exactly what we do in life. We're creating, and
Exactly.
that's a deeper, that's kind of going deeper into that, but yeah, so but thank you so much for joining me today and providing your value, your feedback in this conversation, and really going through kind of the drawbacks or the positives into each type of mode, like psychotherapy versus hypnotherapy. I'm so grateful for you coming on. And
Thank you.
can you please tell all of our listeners how to find you?
Yeah, so revivetherapy.com, that's the name of my practice. Soon I'm going to be creating many contents on sports psychology, hypnosis, anxiety, and depression. So I'm going to be putting content out there for anyone that's just interested in knowing what we're about and what we're pushing, to heal the world
Wonderful.
and just make things much easier than things with when it comes to being a stronger, better, wiser version of yourself. With at least with hypnosis is much easier than it would be with traditional
Mm.
counseling. So I'm glad that people that come to us they immediately discover that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on The Awakened Mind. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.